Howdy and welcome back. This is part 2 of the Vectorio Apple II Plus clone series, I guess. This time round I'm going to be putting the keyboard back together. The keys need a good clean and then need to reassemble it. And then after that we'll get to the good stuff, which is looking at the keyboard electronics itself. This one appears to be quite a bit different to your standard Apple II keyboard from what I can tell. So yeah, we'll get to that, but for now we'll get into the mind-numbing bit, the time lapse of cleaning the keys and putting it back together. So this is just soapy water. I have seen I think it was on Adrian's Digital Basement, there was a suggestion that you could use denture cleaner. I think it was Adrian's channel. And just sort of sit it in a solution of denture cleaner and it would clean keys quite well. I don't have any of that to try, but it's certainly on my shopping list. Okay, so that's the keys given a first sort of scrub in soapy water. In a minute I'll go and get some just plain water just to rinse them off before I sit them on the bench to dry for a while. But interestingly here, this key switch, for want of a better description, fits over the power lead on the bottom left of the keyboard, and you can see it's quite yellowed, and you can see the original colour there and the yellowed colour from age and sunlight. That sort of gives you a bit of an idea of what's to come with the case. The case is very yellowed as well. And there's a few mixed opinions on what I should do, whether I should retrobrite it, paint it, or just leave it the way it is. I did speak to a local collector a few months ago, and he was of the opinion to just leave it the way it is. And I'm kind of inclined to agree. I mean, leaving it the way it is sort of does show the machine's history. You know, it's had I guess not a hard life, but a life in the sun, a life sort of exposed to the heat and what have you. So yeah, the jury's still out. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do, but I'm leaning towards leaving it the way it is. Anyway, I'll go and get some water and we'll drop these into rinse. Okay, so back with with a rinsed out tub and some fresh clean water. We'll just drop these in just to rinse the soap off them, any residual soap. Oops, lost one. Did I use another one? No, I didn't. Alright, get rid of this wet mess off my static mat. I hate having water in the workshop, but necessary evil sometimes. Okay, now while I was out, I borrowed one of the wife's old towels. So we'll just pull these out. We're just going to sit them face up so that any water that's left in them dribbles out the bottom. Because we don't, if we sit it that way up, the water's just going to sit in there. We'll have to wait forever for it to evaporate. So easier to put them face up, and the water will just run out of them. They'll self-drain. Right, and that is that. So I might just get a wipe here, or a couple, and just put them over the top, just to soak the moisture off the top of them. Won't leave it there, but we'll just sort of try and get the pools of moisture off the top. It needs to sit upright. And that should be okay. Okay, well, I'll leave that sit for a few hours. It's the middle of the workday here for me, so I'm just in my lunch break. Thought I'd get this done so they could sit through the afternoon and dry. So we'll pick this up again in a few hours' time and start putting the keys back on the keyboard. Well, what was supposed to be a couple of hours ended up being a couple of days. But yeah, let's get back into it and we'll put this keyboard back together. Just move these out of the way and get our keyboard PCB and start putting it back together. Now, I'm going to try and get this one back in. Spacebar, and it goes. It's fiddly. Goes that way. That must be the other way. This only goes one way. That's the way it goes. And we've got to get this back in there. So this goes in like that, I believe, and then pushes down into there like that. Right, now, so there is our completed reassembled keyboard. So we are missing, I'll get rid of that. So this keyboard cable goes in this way. Right, and that's in. Right, so next up we'll put these stiffening bars back in. That goes in there. This one goes in there. Find a screwdriver. These screws just go in from this side, like so. And we'll tighten them a little bit in a second. I'll just get them in the holes first. Should have put this on before I put the keyboard cable on. Would have been a little bit easier, but anyway, it's on now, so we'll leave it on. Right, one complete keyboard assembly. Now, something that is interesting with this keyboard, if you look down in between the keys, and I should have done some video of this while I still had the keys off, but down in there are diodes between every key. And I've got some still photos I'll overlay during the edit that shows those. But that's quite different from a standard Apple II. Standard Apple II doesn't have the diodes across the keyboard matrix on the keyboard. And the difference is that with the diodes, you can do N key rollover, where you can hold down any number of keys on the keyboard and the computer can work out all of the keys that you've got held down without phantom keys and ghosting and what have you. On the original Apple II keyboard, which doesn't have the diodes, you can only hold down 2 keys at a time. And the computer will only detect accurately 2 keys held down at a time. If you hold down a 3rd key, it might detect it, or it might detect a incorrect key in its place. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. But it's interesting that the Vectorio has all the diodes in the matrix and is theoretically capable of N key rollover. I doubt the ROM images that come with it as standard support that, but there'd be nothing to stop you writing your own keyboard scanning routines and implementing that. In fact, then again, the keyboard routines may support it. Depends how they're written, I suppose. But anyway, yeah, so that's a complete keyboard. And yeah, in a sec, we'll have a quick sort of run through on how these diodes work in the circuit to provide that N key rollover. So a keyboard without diodes is just a relatively simple matrix, typically. The input-output controller that's scanning the keyboard has the rows set up as inputs, with the inputs held high, typically with an internal pull-up resistor. And the columns are set up as outputs on the interface controller, and it polls them sequentially. So in the normal state, you've got these are all high, and if you press the A key, that closes that switch, and as the controller scans, it'll lower, say, column 1 to be a binary 0, and through the key switch that's been closed, this will drag row 1 low. So that will end up going low. And then when the keyboard scanning code reads the input pins, it will see that row 1 is low. It'll know that it's set column 1 low. It'll see row 1 low, and it'll know that the A key has been pressed. Now, if you hit a second key, like the 1, and so you've hit A and B, those 2 key switches at the same time, that's okay, because it'll scan the first column just like it did before, and it'll see that row 1 is low, and it'll know you pressed the A. Then it'll set column 1 back to high. So this will end up back as a 1. This will end up as a 0. And it scans this one, and it sees row 1's low again, but it knows that it was polling column 2, and where column 2 and row 1 intersect is the B key. So it'll know that you've pressed the B key. Now, if you hit a third key, say you've pressed the E key, strange things start to happen. So again, we'll start at column 0. The microcontroller, and we've got A, B, and E pressed. So the controller starts at column 1. And what happens here is this input is pulled low because that switch is closed. And through this path, we're also forcing this output low. So that's actually arguably not a particularly good design, because we've got a low output fighting a high output. But that gets dragged low. And this is all low down through here. And oh, we've hit another key switch, which drags row 1 low. Oh, sorry, row 2 low. So these are all low. So when the controller is scanning column 1, it looks at the inputs over here, row 1 and row 2, and it sees row 1 is low. Okay, so it knows you've pressed an A key. But also on column 1, while it's scanning column 1, it sees row 2 is low, and it thinks you've pressed the D key. But you haven't, you've pressed the E key. So this is the problem with the matrix style keyboard. You know, you can press 2 keys, and that's okay, but when you hit a 3rd key, you run the risk of weird current paths like this happening, which cause key presses to be read incorrectly. Okay, so the scenario where you've got diodes in the matrix allows you to do the N key rollover. And the way that works is, if you imagine the rows and the columns are high, so the columns are always high unless the processor is strobing them to poll the keys, and the rows are pulled high by pull-up resistors. So if we close the A key and then the processor strobes column 0, then what happens is column 0 goes low because the processor pulls it low, and through the diode that causes row 1 to drain to 0 volts through the diode. And then the processor, when it scans row 1, knows that the A key is pressed. Now if you have 2 keys pressed, say we've got the A and the B both pressed, when it scans column 1, we scan column 1, this goes low all the way through. That will cause row 1 to go low, which will also pull this low all the way through. But because column 2 is still high, because the process is holding it high, it can't drain through the diode to this 0 volt potential. So that means that column 2 stays high, unlike the previous example without the diode, where that column actually gets pulled low and fights the output of column 2. So if we now hold down a 3rd key, we can see in this arrangement column 2 remains high, row 2 is pulled high, so this is kind of irrelevant. And because this doesn't end up pulling row 2 low, it doesn't phantom detect the D key like it would have without the diodes. So that's basically the rundown on how the diodes stop the phantom keys and enable the processor by strobing the column 1, 2, 3 and so on to pick up every unique key that is pressed. I probably didn't explain that all that well, but I think you'll get the gist of how that works. Okay, so I quickly connected the keyboard back up to the computer just to give it a functional test of all the keys. I didn't have the camera rolling, but plugged it in, had a quick look just to make sure they were all working, and found that the letter K was not working. So I've marked that on the back of the board, which is right here. And yeah, so we'll have a bit of a look and see what's going on there. So these 2 contacts, I think, are just the, I mean, it's obviously a connection, but they are just the mechanical mounting points, I think. If I put we'll just put the multimeter across the, no, this is going to be interesting, need more hands. Put the multimeter across the key, the key switch, to see if the key switch actually works. And yeah, the key switch is working, so I don't think we've got a faulty key switch. Now I did mention that these keys have got, there's like diodes in the matrix. So maybe that is part, like maybe we've got a faulty diode on the K key, so we'll just test that. So we'll just, for reference, we'll go to one next to it, well, a little bit further along, just to see what we should be looking for. And I imagine we're going to see a 0.6 volt drop, which is normally what you see. And in the other direction, we'll see nothing. So that's about as we'd expect. Now, I'm not sure, this key, so that goes to there, so that's all okay. That goes to there, and that's the leg of a diode. So that's the other end. So we're open in that direction, which is normal. Oh, okay, we're open in both directions on that diode. We got a faulty diode. So we'll have to remove that. So yeah, that diode in there is faulty by the look of it. That's going to be fun to get out because they've gone and bent the legs of it over when they put it together. So that's not going to be a whole lot of fun. It's quite apparent I need better lighting in here, isn't it? But we're going to have to take the keycaps off again. Find my keycap puller. Because we've got to be able to get down in there and get that diode out, which is way down in there. Just remove some keys to make a bit of working room. One more just for good measure. Right, so hard to see, but where's something to point with? That's the culprit right there, and you can see that the leg is out of the hole and the other end of it's just floating in the breeze. Nope, still got just a little bit of a hold. Has that brought the... I was trying not to use this because it upsets the camera, but yeah, it's actually brought the pad away from the board as well. Can probably just snip that. I reckon it will near on fall out. There we go. And that is the offending diode. Of course, the $64 question is, what sort of diode was that? All right, so I found a new diode. This is a 1N4148. I don't know exactly what this machine normally uses. I obviously don't have schematics for this particular keyboard because it's a clone, not the genuine article. So I suspect a 4148 will be just fine. But the more immediate issue that we've got, PCB traces have come up with when it was desoldered. So I'm going to have to scrape back the solder mask there and do some quick repairs. So hopefully we can do that. Right, so that's bared the copper there. And this one's going to be a bit more painful because we've got to go both ways on this one. Right, now the diode will just fold his legs based on the gap on this side, because it's going to be a delicate operation to get it into where it needs to go, so we'll try and get its legs the right length before we poke it down this little gap. Right, now the diodes on this board are all oriented the one way. This is going to be interesting to try and get in there. That was easier than I thought it was going to be. Right, so the new diode is down in the gap. It's a little hard to see, but it is down in there. Still not convinced that that's actually. Let's just see what the meter says. So we need to be getting from from there to there. Right, so we do have a connection all the way through. Yep, that is in fact intact. Oh, you mongrel. We'll fix this one. What that was. Does that actually make a connection? Yeah, apparently it did. Okay, let's see if I can do this without the magnifying glass so that you guys can actually see. Not sure that I can, but we'll give it a go. Apparently I could. So let's see if we've got connectivity to all the places we need it. So there to there is good. Make sure that this trace is good end to end. I think it was that one, yeah. And then from here to this should give us a reading across the diode, including all of the. I'll put in 0.62. Right. So that proves that the diode's right, as well as the wiring. So now I should be able to put it back together and have a K key that works. I might just try and very gently give that a clean with some alcohol, just to clean the flux and what have you off. Just want to be very careful to try and not disturb things too much. Right, I think we're okay. Okay, so put some keys back on the keyboard. Okay, our keyboard's back together. Let's give it a quick run. This time I'll have the camera on. Okay, so I've got the machine together on the bench and I've just powered it on. Right, well, we're going to have to go decidedly low tech. My video capture converter thingy doesn't like the output from the board in the slightest. So we'll go old school and simply point a camera at a TV. So do we have a K key? Yes, we do. Right, well, it seems like all the keys on our keyboard are actually working now, so that's a win. So that was a quick reassembly of the Vectorio's keyboard and a bit of a run through on some of the more unique features of this particular keyboard that don't seem to be features of a standard Apple II keyboard. So yeah, this video obviously took a little bit longer to get out than expected. Sort of life got in the way, but anyway, them's the breaks. So next time round, we will probably be looking at putting the machine back together, so back in its case, and completing it and powering it up intact. So we'll see how that goes. But for the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to tap the like button, subscribe if that's your thing, and maybe we'll see you next time. Cheers.